Brady McLean, you were on Driven to Ride. How are you, sir?
I'm better now. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for being here. We really appreciate it. Before we get started real quick, I do have something that I want to show you.
Oh, hey, look at
I don't know
that.
if you
The
can see it.
OG. Oh, I can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of my very favorites, man. That script is that's classic. I love that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Go Fast, Don't Die, not to spoil who you're with and all that, but been a big fan of you guys for a long time. I've had this hat for quite a few years. It's been with me to quite a few different places, so
That's amazing.
I appreciate the brand.
I don't think we sell that one anymore, so clearly you've had it for a while. I appreciate that. Thanks for breathing life into it, man.
Yeah, man, I love it. So, but let's just jump right in and get started at the beginning. What do most people kind of know you for? What would you say is your claim to fame?
Man, I would never claim any fame, but honestly, people know me from all different chapters. I think there was a time where I pretty much lived off a motorcycle and rode everywhere and rode somewhere between 40 and 50,000 miles a year for a few years. It hasn't been that way for the past couple years, but some people know me from just traveling. They picked up on. As far as like the larger audience who knows me and follows me and pays attention, they usually, I would jump on with all kinds of people because I would run into all kinds of people, kind of use Instagram and Facebook and social media to meet people and meet up with people. So they know me from usually me showing up in someone else's story from somewhere on the road. And then, people know me now sometimes because they know Go Fast. They know the brand. And I try to hide behind that. I try to not it's not about me. It's not about any one of us that kind of work on it. We always say the brand is like the muse and we're just here to serve it. So, we kind of get our marching orders and when we go to work. So.
Nice. So when you say Go Fast, what is Go Fast? I know it's a short for something.
Yeah. Go Fast, Don't Die is, for me, it's a brand. I think brands drive culture. Brands drive people to go, okay, I want to be like that thing. When you look at how people interact with brands, how people represent brands, they put something on themselves and they're, we're from Wyoming. So branding here means, you're burning cattle and you're saying, this is mine. This one's mine. This one's mine. And a lot of people now, they brand themselves. They say, I belong to this thing. And so Go Fast, Don't Die is a brand that we invite people to belong to. And the kind of crux of what it takes to quote unquote belong is that we're encouraging people to live their best story. That's kind of our mission statement is to contribute to the culture and community that inspire our existence. So we're trying to just breathe life into them and encourage them to live a story that they'll be stoked about at the end. So, and we are a lifestyle apparel brand. So we, sell clothes that people can wear and hopefully when they put it on, it means something to them.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I've always been attracted to Go Fast, Don't Die because of the authenticity. I lived for a couple of years out west in Boise, Idaho, so it does kind of have that Western vibe to it, which is super cool. So I've been a fan for a long while. So it's, like I said, it's great to have you here. But let's, it sounds like you've got a hell of a story to tell. So let's start at the beginning. How did you get into motorcycling to begin with?
So my grandpa used to have he still does, but he had a Harley Sportster. And, most people who are familiar with the Sportsters, familiar with Harleys, they're like, Sportster, that's the little one that Harley has. That's kind of the intro. I actually had a guy in Dallas one time. He was an Uber driver, and he was like a big bike, burly biker dude. He tried to convince me that Sportsters were specifically made for girls. And I was like, no, I don't think that's the way. We had a funny conversation. But anyway, when I was a kid, my grandpa had a Sportster. All I knew that he had a Harley. And it was this big motorcycle, this big, loud, kind of scary. Pipes got hot. I wasn't allowed to get close to it, but he would take me for rides on it. So, that I guess is kind of where motorcycles started in my life, was from my grandpa. And then later on, I had a girlfriend who her whole family, and her family was super meaningful in my life and loved them very much. But her whole family rode motorcycles. So it was sort of like, if you're
Nice.
going to be involved here, you better ride motorcycles. So like, this is kind of not an option. And actually, her mom is the first one that I can ever really remember saying, "Go fast, don't die." And I was like, man, I love that. Yeah. And so, so I bought a motorcycle eventually. I started riding on a Buell Blast. That's how I like learned. When I was a kid, man, my buddy did motocross really competitively, and he took me out one time on his bike, and he let me ride it. And I was like, I didn't want any lessons. I've always been that way. Like, I don't want to learn. Just let me go. If you can do it, I can do it. And he put me on. Sure. They put me on like the biggest meadow, like the biggest open field, and the grass was kind of long, but there was just nothing to hit. Nothing could go wrong. And I hit the one rock on this little 50. I just was pinning it. I was like, see, I'm the man, dude. And I hit the one rock that was in the whole field, launched me over. So my early days of riding a motorcycle were non-existent, essentially. I think when I was like 5 or 6, I stopped until I was probably 17, 18. And so I learned on that Buell Blast. Pretty soon I had a Sportster of my own. I just spray painted it all flat black.
Nice.
And those were kind of the early days. It was kind of casual riding. I'm super familiar with most of the motorcycle industry, or most of the motorcycle community, I should say, are casual riders. They enjoy motorcycles. It's like it's a way to get away, and it's really a form. I really believe it's a form of therapy, first and foremost, for most people. And I think that gets overlooked. I think that's what our brand tries to really point out. Is like, hey, the what is really cool, but let's point at the why, so we can enjoy the what a little more. So anyway, I don't know if that answered, and I'm really good at just diving off the diving board and diving into the deep end. So if you give me a little ammunition, I'll fire it.
Yeah, no, all good. So you started riding 17, 18 and kind of progressed from there. Did you have a moment when you kind of knew you were hooked on motorcycles and you'd be riding like the rest of your life?
It was a way that you could go and enjoy time with someone and be by yourself at the same time. That was always really special. We went on one kind of big trip, and it was sort of the only big trip I had ever done before we kind of launched Go Fast, and I turned into, this miles, this highway boy that I became. But I was with my dad and my brother-in-law and my father-in-law and my uncle, and we were all like, we went on a trip to Las Vegas and to the Grand Canyon from Wyoming. And I was just like, man, I just like, this is such a we wouldn't just jump in the truck and go, probably. Right. Like, and if we did, it would be like, I don't know, we'd all be sick of each other pretty quick sitting in the truck, And so being on the motorcycle, I'm like, dude, I'm right next to my dad, and he's having his whole own experience of what this is right now, and I'm having my whole own experience, and we're sharing it, and we're going to get to the end of this, and everyone's going to want to talk about whatever they just went through, and we all went through it together, but it was also different. I think in that time I was just like, this actually is this is more than just like, a cool piece of machinery that goes fast. This thing, the cliche saying is, 4 wheels moves the body and 2 wheels moves the soul. And on that trip, I'm like, I get it. So, I think there have been a number of trips, but that one was probably the first one I can remember where I was like, this is something more than just what it is on the surface.
Yeah, it's like a collective zen, I think, where you're focused on, operating the machine and just rolling down the road, but you can do that in a group. And I think that you kind of put it in a great way, that it's like, it is alone together, which is special.
Yeah. Yeah. And it kind of, I'm super, if you couldn't tell, I'm super ADHD or neurodivergent or whatever they call it these days. And something about having my butt planted in the seat and my hands, on the bars, my feet on the pegs, and the constant changing of the scenery in front of me, it lines up the cogs in my brain to actually be able to think about one thing for a while. And
Yeah, for sure.
honestly, like there really is no other environment where I can really do that. Sometimes, out in the woods, I like to go into the deep woods by myself and just, go be away from everyone, which is really easy where I'm from. But uh,
Sure.
that and a motorcycle, and really the motorcycle is number one by far. It just allows me to think through a complex issue or, something big. Because oftentimes my brain's going bang, 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 all over the place. And so that
Yeah,
thing
I
I think
feel
is
you.
really, really special. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels that way. So
No, I'm right there with you, man. It always seems like if you got a problem or you need to just get away for a minute, that's kind of a good way to get away. And just like I always tell people, you have to focus on operating the machine. You can't necessarily think about anything else. And so that helps you focus. And I think that it's almost like shower thoughts, you're just
yeah,
away from
exactly.
everybody, away from all the distractions. And you can really just start to unpack things that have kind of piled up into your mind. So I'm totally right there with you, man.
Yeah, and anybody who might be listening to this who has ADHD or just is like has a hard time focusing or a hard time spending time on one issue or one thing. If you don't
Yeah.
ride motorcycles, which I imagine if they're listening to the podcast, they probably do, but it's such a beautiful. Not everyone's brain works a little different. Everybody's heart and mind works a little bit different. For me, if
For
I've got
sure.
something, I got to hit the road with it and we can work it out on the road. But it's like, this is where we go to work.
Yeah. So, talking about kind of the neurodivergent ADHD, whatever you want to call it, is dealing with that where the phrase "destroy what destroys you" mean? Because that's all over Go Fast.
Yeah. So Destroy What Destroys You was actually written. There was a place that I stayed in West Texas, which it was a terrifying place, actually. Like, it was only one of the only places I ever left in the middle of the night. Like, I've camped at a lot of really
Oh,
weird
geez.
spots, and
Sure.
I've been sketched out before for sure. Like, I've ridden through central Mexico by myself, and I've
Hmm.
been in a lot of sketchy situations. But that one, I ended up like packing up in the middle of the night and taking off, and I was like scared because it was like super dark. And I don't know if anybody's
Yeah.
ever been
Yeah.
to West Texas, that the vibes over there are already like super weird. It was like, have you ever been to Marfa? Are you familiar with Marfa?
I know of Marfa. I've never been there.
Yeah, Marfa. So like people probably recognize it. There's that like Prada store in the middle of in the middle of nowhere. That's Marfa. But that whole
Right. Right.
area is just full bananas. A lot of oil. Anyway, blah blah blah. That was written on a it was written on a wall out there, and
Okay.
most of our stuff comes from the road. It comes from lessons learned on the road, thoughts had out on the road, because that's where it sort of comes to life, or that's where the muse speaks to us, I suppose you'd
Yeah.
say. And yeah, it just spending time over thinking about destroy what destroys you. I think motorcycling has always had sort of this, or the motorcycle culture has always had a sort of this like kind of tough guy, like bravado, and a lot of that's ego driven. And we've always been
Sure.
pretty against. I mean, not against that, but it's more just like a lot of guys who are presenting in that way. They're generally masking something. They're using that as like that's a safety thing. That's
Sure.
a way for them to feel safe. Like, and I get it. I totally get it. And motorcycles and that whole thing. For me, it's like whatever that is, let's not just mask it and like shut the door behind it and say we don't open that door. Let's have the courage, the real courage, to open those doors and explore who you are and what comes from you and what does destroy you. Because it's not, it's never the mountain; it's always the rock in your shoe. And if we can figure out what that rock is, if we can figure out what those things are, you can really get on that journey of becoming and that journey of growth and that journey that you are probably in search of if you ride motorcycles, because most of the time motorcycles is kind of just an interesting expression. If someone wants to ride one, they probably are in pursuit of a better story for their life, or a deeper story for their life, or a more exciting story for their life. And motorcycles, they think that's the catalyst, and fortunately for them, it absolutely can be.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. There's a lot packed into those four little words, man.
Yeah, no, it's also, oh man, I think Against All Authority is like a punk rock band, and I think they have a song. I could be getting that wrong. We hear it all the time. People are like, they'll accuse us of biting. They accuse us of stealing it from them. But I actually really like
Sure.
Against All Authority, and I mean, I don't. It's not. We didn't come up with it. We saw it on a wall. I don't know who wrote that in Sharpie on a wall in West Texas.
Right.
I would love to find who did that. But yeah, just super rad, man. I think the simpler you can put anything, the more it can translate. So I've got, I mean, we could probably put thousands of pages on what that means, and
Right.
all of like what that means in a journey or what it looks like in someone's individual journey. But to be able to boil it down into 4 words is honestly sort of our thing. I mean, that's our name, Go Fast, Don't Die. And the whole thing there is like, find your edge and live there, find the edge of your life where you feel like you're living to the nth degree. Like I'm on the edge of my seat here. I'm on the edge of what I can be doing. I'm pushing I'm pushing my story's potential.
Yeah.
And live there, and don't kill yourself with it. Don't go overboard. Find
Right.
find sort of that balance of imbalance. Find that place to live that keeps you excited, that keeps you pressing on and making a great story that one day you'll look back and go, dude, nice. I really like the ride I just did with my life.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of rides, you mentioned that you've done, 40, 50,000 miles a year on the road. Tell me about that. How did that get started? I mean, what drove you to take so many trips like that? And kind of, I know you've been, I think, across the country a couple of times on those rides too.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we really even started with Go Fast, I think Go Fast was sort of, a lot of people kind of have their small, like between friends brands, like their little thing.
Sure.
Like, this is our little crew and this is our thing. And we got t-shirts made and that kind of stuff. And that's kind of that's kind of what Go Fast was. We have and had a marketing agency here in Wyoming. And so we had a designer and I had them do some logos and just like we made some t-shirts, just a few. And then my life kind of just got kind of turned into a country song. Just one thing went wrong after another till finally, like, I was in such depths. I was in such like kind of all I really had was my motorcycle. And that was really like the only way that I saw to quote unquote get out, of the situation that I was in. And the situation was bad enough that I'm like, I would take anything. And I can't kill myself because my mom might find me, and that I just can't do. I couldn't do that. So if that's not an option, what can I do? And I'm like, well, I could go live really recklessly, and I might die out there, and that kind of won't be my fault. And I can go out on a high note. I wasn't really happy with the story I had lived until then, that far. When I actually looked back on my story, I wasn't super proud of it. I wasn't super stoked on it. There were bits and pieces I was super grateful for. But there wasn't much of a story there. If you were to make that story into a movie, it would be a tragedy, I mean, and I'd be the main character in a bummer of a movie. And I was like, well, if I'm going to die on the road, which kind of was, I don't know where that came from, but that's just sort of what it felt like. I'm like, I maybe got a couple years to go tell a new story. And I just got on my bike, dude, and took off and just started saying yes. Like, hey, you want to go to here? You want to do this? You want to do this? You want to do this? Yep, 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 yep. And a lot of people are terrified to do that because it's a terrifying thing. I fully get it. I'm a kid from Wyoming. We're the rarest Americans. We're the least populated state. So I didn't know anything about this sort of, big world. I was like going in blind. I remember the first time I rode into California, which was, like the first time I rode into California, I'm sitting in traffic, just dying of heat, I'm like, dude, my bike's hot.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like looking around these mountains. I'm like, I don't even know where I'm at, but there's traffic for, miles and miles as far as I can see. I've never even seen this. We don't have traffic in Wyoming. Like we actually
Right.
don't have traffic ever. If there is traffic, it's like the weirdest thing. Someone crashed or something. And then a bike blew past me, and I'm like, oh, you can split lanes here. Okay, here we go. My first time splitting lanes, and I was like, oh, this is terrifying. But this is cool. And so,
Yeah.
and when you do that, and you look and you go, that's scary and that's dangerous, and I probably shouldn't. But when usually, our minds go toward self-preservation, right? We don't want to be embarrassed. We don't want to get hurt. We don't want to take those risks. We have that risk happy, is one of our kind of core sayings here and core ethos.
Yeah.
pieces.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, like when it was sort of like, well, I'm down to die. If it kills me, that's not necessarily the worst thing that could happen. The worst thing that could happen was I go back to how I felt, when I left. So I was just stoked, man. So, from doing that to like running away from cops in Mexico and like charging past through states and just breaking laws and being just being insane, and doing the dumbest stuff. We went on Mexico's highest suspension bridge, and everyone were like all doing wheelies and like standing up on bikes and just like it. And it wasn't even about, like some look cool on Instagram. It was just like, let's just kind of hit the main vein with some, we're down here. Anyway, all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the original question? What was it? Where did I get
Well,
off?
so I guess off of that, how long were you kind of out on the bike, just around the country?
Oh yeah, you're asking about trips. So it was kind of just one big trip, man. Like it was like, okay, here I go. And I was like, well, I don't want to go back to what I was doing before. And my business partners were sort of like, you shouldn't. We should launch Go Fast as a brand, because even in that time, like all of these sort of, I don't want to say epiphanies, I don't really love that word, but the lessons I was learning and the realizations I was coming to, like on the road, were kind of profound. And I was like, and I kind of came back to life after getting involved with this community of people in pursuit of a better story for their life. And they were riding motorcycles. And, there's this really special thing, like, people don't wave at each other when they're driving their cars down the street. They're annoyed that someone else is there,
Yeah, for sure. I was going to say, was there something like I was going to say, is there a lesson, like a very, the biggest lesson or the most profound lesson you kind of learned during that trip?
Oh man. Yeah, I think probably the one that comes to mind. I'm certain that there were multiples, because it was like I said, it was a very long trip. I mean, I went to California, and then we went to Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, down into Mexico, old Mexico, and rode down to Mazatlan. Then I rode back up and went to Texas and just right. Like it was just all over the place. From then, that was 2017. And pretty much from then until 2020, when things sort of shut down. And even then we were on the road the whole time. It was just sort of one big trip.
Wow.
It was lots of little trips, but it was one big trip in multiple countries and all the states. And, but the one time, so right when I had left Wyoming, I sort of the first stop was in Las Vegas, and my buddy had a deal with these hotels, so I got this hotel for a pretty good price, and I got it for 2 nights, and I was staying in Las Vegas, and right across the street from this hotel is a place called Hogs and Heifers. It's like a kind of classic biker bar, or I don't know. Some people will go clear across the country to go there. And we had gone there on that trip that I was telling you about with my dad and brother-in-law, father-in-law.
Yeah.
So I went there and I parked in the bike parking right out front. And I just sat on a bench, dude. And I was this kid who didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I'm like, what are you doing, dude? Like, I'm sitting on a bench in Las Vegas by myself. I just left home. I'm a long ways from home. I have no idea what I'm doing. Pretty much all the money that I have to my name is in my wallet, which that was a crazy story too. I dropped that wallet. I got pulled over and had to get my ID, and I put it on the top of my pack and gave him my ID. And then he came back and gave me my ID. I put it in my pocket. This is the same trip,
Sure.
same spot in Las Vegas. And I put my ID in my pocket and left because I was like, oh my gosh, like I thought I was in big trouble.
Yeah,
and all
you're
that.
rattled a little.
And then I drove off, and my wallet was on top of my pack, and like I had all my money was cash right there. And so I drove all the way back to the hotel, and then realized I didn't have my hotel key, and it was in my wallet. And I was like, oh my gosh, like all my money, all my stuff, like my, all the stuff, like everything I've got, my credit cards, cash, everything. And I rode back there, dude. And it's like one of the busiest intersections in Las Vegas. And it like, like homeless people chilling all over the place. And my wallet was still there. And I was like, dude, God smiled on me that day. But anyway, back to the question. There was a Canadian dude, sitting outside, kind of your classic, biker looking dude, big belly, and had a do-rag bandana sitting there. And so I'm sitting on this bench, just kind of catching my soul breath of like, what are you doing? We've left.
You're reckoning with yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. I was out of Wyoming, which I think it was March. It was like the end of March. So Wyoming was like, it was literally freezing when I left. It was 32 degrees.
Yeah. Yikes.
And so I got down there, and this guy goes, this guy's like probably 10 feet away from me. He goes, is that your motorcycle? And I kind of didn't realize he was like even talking to me. And I looked, oh yeah, that's mine. And he was like, who hurt you? And yeah. So for context of the story, before I left, I had signed divorce papers.
Okay.
Before I left Wyoming. So I was in a season of like, pretty hurt, but I didn't know I was wearing it on my forehead. You know what I mean?
Right.
So he goes, who hurt you? And I was like, how do you know me? Like, what do you like? That's a pretty, seems like a pretty specific question. And I looked at my bike. I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, are you out here with any friends? And I'm like, no, it's just me. He's like, yeah, people don't pack up a bike like that. You're from Wyoming, you're a long ways away from home. People don't pack up a bike like that and, run out by themselves because everything's going great. And I remember just being like, wow, dude, you don't know my story at all. You don't know what I've been going through. You don't know anything about me, but you've looked at a motorcycle and a guy sitting here, and all of a sudden, you know everything about me somehow, and
I read you like a book, man.
Exactly. And you know how to ask, cut straight to the core, like, the exact question to have a really deep conversation, a really meaningful exchange with someone. And you have the courage and the curiosity to do that. And I was like, this community is different than a lot of communities. A lot of communities, are very superficial. They would talk about, and even the motorcycle scene, a lot of people who maybe aren't as secure or haven't been hurt as much as this individual was, he knew me, and he knew what he wanted to talk about. He knew how he wanted to point me, and I needed someone to talk to. Strangely enough, it was a overweight biker that day, and I realized that I'm not alone in this. I'm not the only one out here in search of a better story, in search of some healing, in search of some understanding. This is a whole thing, and that was sort of the beginning of like, I'm going to pay back this community. I'm gonna live in service to this culture and community, and try to, where I see improvements we can make as a culture. I want to just open the space for that, and where I see opportunities where we can deepen as a community, I want to make space for that. And that's really the heart of the brand, right? That's the heart of what Go Fast is. Yeah.
One of the things that I've noticed is because I subscribe to your guys' newsletter, and, you guys have the usual sales emails and stuff. And, there's always some attitude in there, which is cool. It always sticks out. But it's like every Sunday, I think you guys kind of send out an email about like life advice and, kind of spreading your philosophy, and kind of have these different mantras and stuff. And it really sticks out in my head. You guys are very like mental health conscious. conscious about just, a lot of the stuff that you're talking about. Where did that come from? Like, to start that kind of life advice with the newsletter, and what's kind of been the response to that?
I think it's maybe the most important thing we do, that email. And you'll notice, there's never a sale attached to that. There's not products
No.
attached to that. You actually have to work pretty hard to be able to click to get to our website from that email. And for me, it's always been a brand. And thank God for my business partners, or we probably would never have, made a dollar on doing any of this.
Right.
But for me, it's a brand, and a brand means something. And it's like we say, your life, not your words, is your story, right? Not your words or doctored images is your message to the world. And yeah, so I saw, I guess, a lot of brands kind of popping up in the world. And it was like when you'd learn and they'd be super cool, like cool designs and cool apparel and like cool products. And then you'd look and like you find out who's behind it. You're like, hey, do you want to go ride, or do you want to go, I don't know, do something, or come to this camp out we're doing, whatever. And it was like a lot of times the people behind it weren't even, they didn't care for a community. They didn't care for a culture. They didn't care that they're contributing. They were just kind of culture vultures, as they say. And I was like, man, we need to do something that is only in service. I want, obviously we sell things and people like buying our stuff. People like wearing our stuff. So, that's not a bad thing. That's not an evil thing. That's a good thing. And I love to offer somebody something without any expectation, that would only serve them. There's no like, oh, and this thing at the end, I don't want, I love that idea.
There's no gotcha.
Exactly. So we, On Any Sunday was a motorcycle film. I'm sure you're familiar with it. But we came up with this. We were doing this like On Any Sunday email, and then it turned into On Any Someday email after we came out with because the idea would be that we're encouraging people. We have this hat that says "Someday isn't a day on the calendar," and we're encouraging people through different stories, any way that we can possibly say. We're essentially saying the same thing every week, which is go live your very best story. And we're trying to give people tools and ways to think and perspective and philosophy on what that could look like, might look like, should look like, and then some artwork that they can save that we made for them. We made for you, and hopefully they can save that as a reminder to that story so they can bring it into their week and go, okay, cool. Here's how I'm going to make my week better. Here's how I'm going to make my story better. And Go Fast, Don't Die. If we are the brand who's encouraging people to live a better story with their life, what could we do to actually do that, actually help people? Because we can't, we do a Devilstone run every year, which is a ride where we invite people to come and ride with us and show them our neck of the woods. Well, it's sold out every year, and we don't want to make it any bigger because it's intimate, we don't want a giant thing where there's tons of people and nobody connects and makes friends. We want a small, intimate, even as big as it is, which we get we try to cut it at 250 or 100 people or 150 people. Yeah. It always ends up being 200 and above because we're not great at when people are like, hey, can I please come? I really want to come. And two of my friends are coming. We're like, yeah, we'll find a spot for you kind of thing. But, even then it's kind of big to be able to really make that connection. So yeah, we're like, well, I'm sick of sales emails, and nobody needs another sales email in their inbox. It's
right.
I don't know if you want to say, I have a weird feeling. I have a weird relationship with selling anything to anybody. But so I want to say sales emails are a necessary evil, but they're not. They're not evil at all. It's great. And people love buying our stuff, and I love people that buy our stuff, and I love that they do because it allows us to continue to do what we do. And I love the idea of our email list is something like 170,000 people, and us just delivering value to them with no expectation to say, hey, we love you guys. Here's some food for thought. It's also really good for us. Like I said, none of us are the brand. the brand is the brand, and we kind of get our marching orders from the brand and try to carry them out. So we always have a great discussion every Sunday because we do them live. We don't schedule them ahead of
really?
time. Yeah, no, we do them.
Okay.
We do them live. All that artwork is drawn every single Sunday. All of those stories are, discussed, and those emails are written on Sunday. Intentionally, we do it that way. One, because we're great procrastinators, but two, we actually get together and have like an intentional time to say, well, what does the world need to hear today, or what do we need to hear today? And then through that process, we get to hear it and discuss it and run through it and have that conversation and try to make it as good as possible. And through that, we get to have those conversations, and they're super good for us. They're good for our heart and our alignment and setting ourselves up for success for the week,
Yeah. It's almost like church. It sounds like,
dude, that's exactly it. And I think people, the way that people view church, or, maybe the way they've come up from church, a lot of people on motorcycles are very rebellious. We are not fans of the status quo. That's why,
right.
That's why we like to go, do something different and wear black and piss people off and make too much noise and all of that. And a lot of times people grew up in a church culture, that they rejected because they're like, I don't want anybody telling me what to believe. I don't want any of that. And so for us, it's like, the bummer thing is you kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater in that, where like you maybe don't have an intentional time of reflection and an intentional time of devotion into something that is deep inside of you, like that you need to consider, and you need to reflect on, or you need to sit with. So yeah, it is a lot like that. It's we think of it a lot like a secular sermon,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love it. I mean, it's funny because you'd think I'd, expect it every Sunday, but it always seems to surprise me every time. Like, oh, I forget that this is coming up. So I always try to give it a read, and it does make you think and give a little self-reflection time. So
that's
I
amazing.
imagine thank you for sending it out. But I imagine then, the Devilstone run that you guys put on every year is like kind of almost a retreat then. Can you tell me like where Devilstone Run came from, where the idea came from, what the run is? Just tell me everything about it.
Yeah, so I rode from Wyoming to Born Free 10. Are you familiar with Born Free?
Yeah.
So I rode from Sheridan, Wyoming to Born Free 10, and I did it in like 27 hours, I think it was. Like I rode just straight through. It was and in that time, man, that's all I wanted to do, was just crazy rides. I just wanted to say yes to everything. I wanted to do stuff that would make people, or would make me doubt myself, right? So I rode. It was so hot that year. I rode into Las Vegas. And my pipe actually like melted in half. Like it had got a crack in it or something like that. And just whatever it was, it broke in half. And so at like 2 a.m, shout out Holden Pruitt, my buddy Holden, who I'd run into when I was on my way down to Mexico. He used to work at a place called Main Street Moto in Vegas. Great dude, awesome dude. Stunts Harleys, like just a nutcase. Really, really good dude. But anyway, I was going to meet up with him to ride down, and then a couple of his buddies, which became my friends. But at like 2 a.m, we ran down. We found a pipe, which is the most insane thing in the world, because being in Wyoming, you're not going to find an exhaust pipe for an 03 Dyna. Just someone's got one laying around. Well,
right.
Oh man, dude? This is a bummer that I'm blanking on this dude's name. Really great stunter. Bear. What's his name? Dang it. Anyway, this awesome stunt rider. I can't remember his real name or his stunt name right now, but he had one laying around, and he was up at 2 a.m. And so we got one back on, and I like tied it with wire because we didn't have all the mounting brackets and everything. All of this is, by the way, not necessary. Rode to Born Free, got there at like 10 a.m., We slept for like
Yeah.
half an hour in the night, and then we had to leave again at like 5 a.m. because it was so hot in Vegas. We wanted to leave before the sun came out, so we didn't have to ride through the
Yeah.
desert and the hot sun because it was already like 119 without the sun. Got to Born Free, did the whole Born Free thing. Lots of parts of that story. Went back home, and on my way back home, when I was almost home, I was like, man, the best part of that ride was riding out of Wyoming. And
Sure.
so I'm like, but I just rode all the way to California, to ride Trabuco Canyon and these cool little spots, beautiful spots. But I think the best part of the ride was going through the Tetons and up over the Bighorns and going to Cody and like riding through Wyoming where there's no traffic, it's the least populated state. I would like to invite people to come back to where we're from so we can show them our neck of the woods. And I just thought about it. I'm like, okay, well, what route would we take? And I'm like, well, I'd probably start at Devil's Tower because that's on the east side of the state. It's the nation's first national monument, which is in our state, which is pretty cool. Yeah. And I would just ride straight west because Devil's Tower is cool. It's something to see. It's not super pretty, and the country over there isn't super pretty, but it just gets better and better as you go to Sheridan, and Sheridan's beautiful, good people. It's a beautiful community. And then the Bighorns are a blast, switchbacks and trees and mountains and, waterfalls and all that stuff in the Bighorns, and not very populated. So we can all ride up there pretty safely and have a great time. And then you enter Cody, which is the entrance to Yellowstone. So then we're going to go through Cody, which is a beautiful town. And then we're going to enter Yellowstone. They're going to go through Yellowstone National Park, the nation's first national park, through Yellowstone, come out the other side of Yellowstone. Then you have the Grand Tetons. And you're going to be like, dude, this was one of the most beautiful rides of my life as far as terrain. And we'll do so with, we'll set the culture to say, hey, everyone here is looking out for each other. This isn't a act tough kind of thing. This isn't, like no one cares, right? And to all the tough guys out there, you can just take the weekend off, and none of us will tell anybody that you weren't the toughest guy ever for the weekend. And you can actually just have conversations and enjoy yourself and write in a coloring book if you want to. You're actually just going to take this weekend off, and we're going to have a great time and ride motorcycles like we're supposed to, right? And so that was kind of the beginning of Devilstone. We started it. I kind of pitched the idea when we got home, and it was like, we were like, well, this will have to be next year, because, it's going to require some planning. And our buddy PJ, who he owns a company called Surf Wyoming. He's like, oh, you should do it this year. You're like, just go. Who cares who shows up? just go do it. And he's like, I'll sponsor it. And he gave us $1,000, which is enough to like put together a few things, and got some T-shirts made and whatever. And then we invited people. And I think it started out as like 5 of us, and by the end of it was maybe like 30 of us. And I was like, dude, that was awesome. And then the next year, I think it was probably like 80 of us, something like that. And then pretty much every year since has been sold out. And there's a lot of repeats. So a lot of people have been coming for 5 or 6 years. They're like, dude, this is all I look forward to. I don't go to Sturgis anymore. I just go to this ride. And it's just real, man. It's just community. Nobody has to fake it. Like everybody just has permission to just enjoy themselves. You don't have to hold up some bravado. You don't have to hold up some status or act like you're better at riding than you are or tougher than you are. No one cares. No one cares. And no one's going to tell anybody if you just, be nice and go home, and you can go back home and be your badass self this weekend. Just chill.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, just about that route, I haven't done the eastern route of it, but I've been through, trying to remember, down over the Tetons down into Jackson, and then go up from Jackson Hole through the south entrance of Yellowstone. Yeah. And then out through West Yellowstone back when I was living in Idaho. And that was just, like you said, I mean, you're not kidding, bar none, probably the most beautiful scenery I've ever seen in my life. It's unreal.
And what's so cool about coming from the East is it sort of sets you up like imagine like you didn't see color for a while. All of a sudden your color was dimmed to like 10%. You can only see 10% of colors. And then just like So you went one day where you could only see 10%. And the next day you could see 30%. And the next day you could see 100%. And you're like, wow. And that's kind of what the ride is like. It's like day one, wow, I'm having a great time. This is fun, good people, good food, like good culture, good atmosphere, whatever. It's not the most beautiful. And then day two, you get to start climbing up into the mountains. You're like, well, this is fun, and some switchbacks and whatever. And we stop at a tiny little town that has like population 80 people. And all 80 people are there saying what's up and making us food and all that. And it's
Wow.
just, you're just celebrated. And then you go into the next town and everybody's stoked you're there. And it's like, dude, this is the coolest thing ever. And then the next day you go through Yellowstone, which is just sacred lands, and then the Tetons, that's when you're at full 100% color and you're just like, life is so cool. I'm out here with all my friends, and I've got 30 new friends, and I've got 2 new close friends, and I had a close call. I almost, I just am living life, in peak form here for a weekend. So yeah, it's awesome, dude.
Yeah, I love it. Well, in addition to motorcycles, you also practice martial arts. So that's, kind of going in the theme of living life to the fullest. How'd you get into that?
Yeah. So, yep. MMA, I got an MMA for a while. I think every guy has their time in their life. I think I should probably be a fighter. I think I'm pretty tough,
Sure. Yeah. You find out real fast.
I should go. I want to fight. And I did for a while. And I learned, so it started with, I was overweight. I was about 70 pounds, probably overweight, for my height. I was about 220 pounds ish. That's what I was when I finally weighed myself. And there's a lot of context to this story, but I just decided to get in shape. I realized I was in really bad shape. I was not taking care of my health at all. And I never really had considered it until then. I grew up, I skateboarded, and I was super active and,
for sure.
Doing a lot, but then, through college and all of that, I got less active. So I decided to lose a bunch of weight. Well, I dove into it like I do anything head first and started learning about energy balance and macronutrients and diet and exercise and how weight loss works and how getting in shape works and how the body works, all of that. And then I did that for a while. And then a buddy of mine who was probably on his way to jail, I told him to come live with us for a while, because I was like, dude, either you're going to end up in jail or you need to leave the environment that you're in. And if that means you have to leave that environment and come live with me, do it. And he did. And he was an MMA fighter. And so I was like, hey, I'll train you. I was in better shape than he was, but he knew how to fight, right? I said, I'll train you. Like, I'll try to get you in shape, and you teach me how to fight. I would like to start coming to MMA classes. And I remember going to a fight, and they had a guy back out who was right around my weight. Okay. And so it was a championship fight at 155, and I weighed like 155 at the time. I was in great shape. I was lean, I was like, hey, I could do this. And I thought about it, and the guy fighting was 6-0, but I knew him from high school. And I was like, I'm sure I could take him. Us guys, like before you learn how to fight or you learn what fighting is, you just think in your head, like, yeah, somehow I'll figure out how to fight. And so unfortunately for guys, I see them that you're wrong. You don't know how to fight, and it's not going to, don't fight people. Don't do it. But I ended up not taking it. Somebody got in my way. They took the fight before I could, but I wanted to go in that next Monday and prove to myself that I could have beat him. So I went in there, and he was there training because he didn't take any damage because he killed the guy who tried to fight him with no experience, obviously, in like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And so I went in, and I was like, okay, here's my chance to prove myself. And he threw me on my head and put me in an arm bar. And I was like, what am I supposed to do? He's like, you got to tap or your arm's going to break. I'm like, tap. That was terrible. And I was sold. I was like, all right, well, I don't want to ever have that happen again. So I spent about the next 3 years just doing MMA every single night and diving in and learning how to box and learning how to wrestle and learning how to fight in the cage and learning jiu-jitsu.
Wow. Yeah.
And then my coach moved to town, and he was a jiu-jitsu black belt under Pablo Popovich, who anybody who's familiar with jiu-jitsu knows who Pablo was. He's still around. and he actually got his black belt with Wagner Hocha, which if they're familiar with competitive jiu-jitsu, they probably know Wagner. A lot of people, you might not know them, but it's kind of like, I don't know, Kobe
Some
Bryant or
legendary
something like
folks.
that. Yeah. So anyway,
Yeah.
he came to town and he said like, yeah, I'm a black belt under Pablo. And I'm like, okay, that's like saying, yeah, I played for the Bulls in '98. I'm like, no, you didn't. Like, no, you're not.
No big
And,
deal. Yeah.
and then we rolled. That's the funny thing about making claims in martial arts is you have to, back it up. And I rolled with them, and I was like, I don't know how good you are because I'm not good enough to know how good you are, but you are light years ahead of me. And so I kind of stopped doing MMA for a long time and just focused on jiu-jitsu and competing and training with him. So anyway, yeah, that's a massive part of my life. And I actually had a discussion with someone a couple years back, and they're like, hey, you don't put any of your jiu-jitsu online, like on your Instagram or anything like that. Like you put all your motorcycle stuff, but you don't put any jujitsu stuff. And I'm like, yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting how we think we need to, what we think that people are interested in. And we kind of post it up there for, well, this is in alignment with the character I'm supposed to play on the internet. And sometimes we fail to be like, well, this is actually me. And this is a representation of me. So I'm just going to actually put exactly what I do. But yeah, that's a big part of my life, martial arts.
Are there a lot of similarities you find between martial arts and jiu-jitsu and riding motorcycles, you think?
Yeah, man. It's people who have the courage, right, to pull triggers on their life's best story. And a lot of people, men and women, they say, in their head, the superhero in their head, the person they look up to so much knows how to fight, right? Or the person they look up to so much, if they could make a comic book character, which I have a good friend who does that actually. If they could make a comic book character and it was them in their highest form, she would ride a motorcycle or he would fight. He'd be a great fighter. And some people are, they'll just make the comic book character. They'll forever have this fictional version of who they could be in their head. And some people will pull the trigger and say, no, I want to create that person. If the hero in my head, is a poet and the hero in my head can fight and the hero in my head rides a motorcycle and wakes up at this time and drinks his coffee like this and he eats like this and he thinks like this. And in this scenario, this is how he responds. And the people who have the courage to actually become that thing, oftentimes they ride a motorcycle and, or they find themselves in doing martial arts. And a lot of times they're the same person. They just found a different vein to bleed from or a different, place to plant themselves.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I mean, usually when you find somebody who rides motorcycles, there's kind of other hobbies or pastimes or things that they do that are along the same vein. It's just a different flavor. So,
yeah. And, when growing up, you watch movies and the hero, like you go watch superhero movies. A lot of superheroes ride motorcycles, a lot of like spy movies, they jump on the motorcycle and all of a sudden they're doing wheelies and like they're the best rider in the world, But when you grow up and you go, okay, this is what I look up to. This is what I aspire to be. And then you have the courage to go become that thing. A lot of times motorcycles are involved. So you can kind of identify someone who rides a motorcycle. It's not the safest thing to do. It's far from it. But you can identify them and say, this is a person who values a great story over their safety. That's why we say safety second.
Safety second. Yeah, there's another good one. Well, talking about that a little bit more, there's kind of in the industry, I've noticed that some people say that people aren't buying motorcycles as much or they're not riding as much, not as many riders out there, not as many new people learning to ride. It's kind of a two-part question. Do you agree that less and less people are riding motorcycles as compared to back in the day? And if you do agree, then why do you think that is?
So for a while, I paid some attention to that. I have a lot of friends who work in the industry, and I would just get into discussions with them. Honestly, for me, I'm like, I'm not in the industry. I'm not in the motorcycle industry. I don't really the motorcycle industry is cool for me because I serve their people, but I'm a servant
Sure.
to their people, where a lot of people in the industry are quite the opposite. They want to be served by the community that I serve, right? So sometimes we just we couldn't be coming at things more differently. They're in search of, you show up to this party and some people are in search of a great story and some people are in search of a profit. And it's
Mhm.
sometimes hard to tell the difference between the two because usually people don't show up to a party and go, "Hey, I would like to have as much money from all of you, and I would like to find out how I can manipulate it to get the very most, regardless of what your best story is." Um, so I think there are probably numbers to back that up to say that that's true or not true. I would imagine that a lot of those
Mhm.
numbers probably have to do with whether or not people are buying new bikes. I don't know if people are buying used bikes. I think those are tracked differently. I think a lot of people
Sure.
that I know are buying most of the people that I know are buying used bikes, and a lot of them are buying new bikes. But I would say it's probably 3-4 to 1 at least, if not 9 to 1, who are buying used bikes versus new bikes. So I think some of those metrics can get skewed. And again, I haven't looked at any of that stuff, any of those reports. No one pays me to do that. So I don't do that. I don't really care. I mean, it's something I could get into if somebody wanted to, I could get into anything that serves this community. Um,
Sure.
but I would say that people, the reason that our brand does well and communicates with people is we are very in touch and very focused on the why more than the what. So I've worked with a handful actually of different OEMs, just doing you come into weird jobs, like doing side jobs or doing this or that.
Sure.
Because for a while, in the beginning, it would pay for me to go travel. And I could go be a product rep or go do this job for somebody or be a photographer or whatever. But so when I went to, I won't name any names, but I'd go to a training for an OEM, and the whole training, the whole time, it reminded me of college actually. So when I went to college at first, I
Mhm.
had a music scholarship.
Okay.
And I played punk rock, and I had a band, and I could get and in our small town, we were getting over 500 people to come listen to our crappy punk rock band, which was insane, right? And
Yeah.
then when
Yeah.
I was in college jazz band, playing guitar in the jazz band, we'd play our jazz band, which we'd have a big auditorium for, and it was very fancy, and it was funded and all of that. And the only people showing up were the people who were the parents of the kids playing. No one was really showing up because oh, these guys make great music. And I
Right.
remember getting into an argument with my teacher because I did a solo, and he said, "Oh, these notes are incorrect." And I'm like,
Mm.
"Bro, that's a solo. That's a time where I get to make whatever noise I want to make, and there's no saying it's right or wrong. There's only what I put out there and how you react, how the crowd reacts. And if you hate it, then I did, and I wanted you to hate it, or even if I didn't, if you hate it, I did my job because at least it did something to you. At least it said
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
And if you loved it, then I did my job. If you are indifferent, then I probably suck as a musician. My art is probably not compelling, right?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
and everything that he was telling me to do would probably drive people towards indifference. Like, oh, that was nice. That was in the lines of what you're supposed to do. And
Sure.
and
Yeah.
I'm very much not that guy. I'm like, I don't want to play in the lines. So to draw the parallel, when I was in the training for what we were about to tell customers, potential customers in the market, we were talking about features and benefits. We were talking about horsepower and variable valve timing and fuel capacity and
Specs. Yeah.
yeah, specs, like what comes stock and what can they enjoy and why is this better than the last model. And it's all it's a lot of BS too. It's like, well, this is
Mhm.
50 cc's more and there's no replacement for displacement, baby. And you kind of learn how to sell these motorcycles. And I'm like, yeah, so my brand sells a story,
Mhm.
because I genuinely believe people's life will be better if they live this story that I'm selling to them. Right.
Mhm.
And I'm like, you guys, hey, I want to lead this class instead of listening. I want to go up to the front. I don't want to clap when I could do it better for myself, kind of thing. And I was like,
Sure.
we should be talking about the why. And our generation wants to explore their why.
Hmm.
I don't think that mental health has ever been talked about more. I don't think it's ever been pursued more. I would say that I don't know any of the actual statistics on any of this, but I would say there are probably more therapists now than there ever have been, and they're probably getting more work, and more people are in therapy. People are trying to explore what's going on inside and why it doesn't line up with
Sure.
what's going
Yeah.
on outside, right? So when you have people in an industry that are trying to serve or take advantage of this community, the first thing that you have to do is put your finger on their pulse. You got to walk a mile in their shoes and say, here's what they're feeling. And here's the
Hmm.
reason why they're getting into this thing. And if they don't understand why they're getting into this thing, and I can tell you that there are those who look at features and benefits, they look for specs, and they want more. They want more. They want to look at the guy next to them and say, well, mine has this much more whatever than yours has. Not that they act, you're right, like
Yeah.
not that they
Yeah.
actually give a crap. But when that is such a surface level thing. That's such a a skin deep thing. When you can reach in and grab their heart and tell them you know, why they want to do this. Hey, your story has a big blank space in it, and we have the thing that will help you fill it, right? And that is
Hmm.
true. And I wish if the motorcycle industry would get a hold of that thing and pursue that instead of you know, it's like the medical, healthcare pursues taking care of the symptoms and not the source of the disease. And
Sure.
we love
Hmm.
treating symptoms, and it's a little bit of the same thing. It's like, man, if we'd stop focusing on these, like on the low hanging fruit or these surface level things, and when we go straight to the deep end and really appeal to what these people need in their lives by understanding, by loving them, really. If love's other name is understanding, we need to pursue loving this community that we're supposed to be serving. And so, anyway,
Hmm.
I could get into that. I don't know if you can feel it from me, but I'm like, I get so
No,
frustrated,
I can.
and I step out. I'm not part of the motorcycle industry. I'm part of my
Sure.
community and our community's best story. And I just want to talk to us, and we can do our thing. And if the motorcycle industry ever wanted help, or like the first step to solving a problem is admitting there's a problem. If they ever said, hey, we have a problem, my team would love to go help them, because our whole thing is service to our community. And I think that
Yeah.
if the industry could get better, the community would be served by that. So
Nice.
someday I might take that on.
Well, bringing it back to Go Fast, Don't Die, what is, or what has been the most maybe fulfilling or rewarding part of building this brand and serving the motorcycle community for you?
It's 1,000,000%, no question, no close second. The people's lives, people are changing their life. We get messages, if not daily, weekly, talking about something we did that inspired somebody, or just was this the little push they needed, or the little piece of permission they needed to go and do whatever the thing was that made their story better, so that when they get to wherever they get to, when they look back and they go, what did I do with my life? They get to look at one piece, and they attribute this beautiful, sunshiny, like warm memory with our brand and work that we've done. Dude, I think that's what everybody should be. Whatever industry you're in, whatever business you run, you should be saying, how can I make my community's life better? I survive, and I do well, and I thrive because my community takes care of me. They purchase from
Mhm.
me, or they participate in what I'm doing, or whatever. Wow, this is amazing. Are you seeing this?
That
I don't know what I did to make that happen, but if someone's just listening,
was wild.
my screen just started like having fireworks in the back.
Yeah,
But
that was
anyway,
wild.
yeah. So the On Any Someday emails, even just our ads, people will respond to our ads, an ad on the internet, and say, "Hey, this really touched me." And I'm like, dude, yes. I don't care if you
Yeah.
bought anything from us, which is why I'm not always the best businessman. But I really care that you got something from us. Um,
Yeah.
and that's my favorite part. People tell me all the time about how their life is better. People will tell me that they were at their wits' end, at their end of the rope kind of thing, and they read an email or they got some artwork and they got it tattooed on their arm or their leg or
Wow.
whatever. And there's thousands of our tattoos out in the world. And people will be like, hey, I ran into this person in the airport and they were wearing a Go Fast shirt and I was wearing a Go Fast shirt, and we ended up chatting for hours and now we're friends and we're going to go to this thing together. I'm like, dude, our community is like we've officially done it, right? When the goal was we're going to contribute to this culture and community that inspire our existence, we have done it. We have contributed. We continue to contribute. And on the day that we have nothing left to contribute, I would say that's the day our doors close and we hang it up.
I love it. I just got one more question for you, Brady.
Fire.
Do you ever get tired?
Oh man, I live tired. Yeah,
because you're just doing so much. You're running all over the place. You're riding thousands of miles all the time. I mean,
yeah, I got this tattoo on my hand. I don't know if you can see it. It says, "The work is never done."
Yeah. Okay. I love it.
And I think a lot of times we do this thing where, like, if I do this, especially people that think they need to, earn their place or earn their worthiness by achievement or by work. I'm very much in that camp. We work really hard and we kind of think if I work this hard, eventually I'll get to this place eventually. And it's that someday syndrome that we talk about. Everything we talk about, it mostly comes from because I have so many issues that I get to address my own issues and I understand them so well because they are my issues. Right. And that's why I can speak to them or why we can speak to them. But absolutely, yes, I do get tired. I'm such a nut about my health. I wear a little sleep and performance band that tracks my sleep, tracks my heart rate, it tracks all my stuff. My diet is rock solid. I try to sleep well. I work out, twice a day, most days, doing jujitsu, CrossFit. I coach CrossFit. Absolutely, wow. I get tired. And if you're not getting tired, find something that is worth getting tired for.
I love it. Yeah, I'm going to have to probably steal that from you. I'm not tired. I live tired.
I just exist there. I don't know what it's like to be not that. I'm tired, but I'm inspired, And if you're tired and inspired, you've got plenty of fuel. If you're not tired and uninspired, you're probably sitting on a couch just, I don't know. They probably just call that anxiety.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Brady, it's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you for being here and sharing your story and the story of Go Fast, Don't Die. And I've got the Devil's Stone Run on my bucket list, man. So maybe we can make that happen.
Dope. Let's definitely do it. And thanks for having me. We can do this anytime, man. We can actually not even record it. We can just jump on and chat. I love podcasts because we actually get on and have an intentional conversation with someone. And it seems like we do that. I do that more on podcasts than I do just in regular life. Even me, who it's hard to have a conversation with me without diving deep. So I love doing podcasts. I appreciate you having me on, and I'm grateful for the time.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it too. We'll talk to you again soon, man.
All right, brother. Peace.